The rain in Dravara never stopped. It wasn't the cleansing kind, not the sort that carried the smell of earth or the promise of renewal. Here it fell like a sickness, thin sheets laced with the taste of rust and ash, dripping down the warped. Spines of collapsed towers that leaned against one another like drunkards. Black water collected in the pits of broken streets, seeping into foundations that had long since given up. Rails from the old transport system jutted like fractured bones across the avenues, slick and skeletal, reminders of a city that once thronged with order, but now drowned in silence. Arthur, roar moved through the district as if the storm were a uniform he had worn for years. Broad-shouldered, slow in step, his frame still carried the weight of labor and discipline, though the federation that had once commanded him was dust. He rationed energy the way other men rationed food, each step deliberate, no wasted motion. The district had taught him that hesitation got you cut open in a gutter, and rushing burned what little strength you had left. His boots struck the slabs of uneven concrete with measured rhythm, eyes scanning for threats, hands brushing the pry bar hooked at his belt. He had been a surveyor once, trained to walk uncharted ground, to measure, to record, to impose order on the unknown. When the Federation collapsed, the corps scattered, leaving behind their stations like half-built skeletons. Arthur had claimed one, patched it, fortified it, and carved a rhythm out of ruin. Survival was work, and work was all that kept him sane. That evening his list was simple. A valve scavenged from a pump if luck favored him. Maybe a few strips of rations, something he could barter without drawing too much notice. Crowds in the market squares turned desperate when the rain pressed them too long. Desperation made knives flash. Arthur had no interest in fights. He had learned to move like shadow and leave no footprint behind. But then he heard it. Not the hiss of rain against stone or the hollow drip of water through shattered piping. This was sharper, deliberate metal against stone, tapping in a rhythm too hesitant for machines, too fragile for the wind. Arthur froze, shoulders tightening beneath his damp jacket. His gaze swept across the transport hub up ahead, its canopy. Sagging under pooled water, streams falling in crooked lines from torn seams. He tilted his head, listening. The sound repeated. Tap, pause, tap, like a small hand asking a question. He moved closer, every muscle careful. His eyes traced the angles, noting cover, shadows, sightlines. Old habits whispered, measure first, enter controlled. Behind a leaning pillar, he found her. The child was curled against the stone, knees to chest, arms wrapped tight as if her bones alone could shield her. Her skin was a pale violet, dulled by hunger and cold, her short black hair plastered to her, head in dripping strands. A torn dress clung to her frame, soaked through, and her lips trembled each time she exhaled. In one hand she clutched a coin, and with it she had been tapping the stone signal or prayer. He couldn't yet tell. Arthur's chest tightened despite himself. The weight of her small form carried more than fatigue. It carried the sick familiarity. Oaf collapse. He had seen stranded colonists before, faces dulled by starvation, children left in corners when parents could no longer carry them. He crouched slowly, boots grinding against the wet ground, and let his voice cut through the rain. I'm Arthur. I'm not here to hurt you. Her eyes lifted silver-flecked, wide, defensive. She didn't answer. Her grip on the coin tightened, until her knuckles went pale. Arthur studied her as he once would have assessed terrain. Skin tone dulled, tremors in her arms, breathing shallow but alert. Malnourished, yes, but not yet lost. This wasn't hopeless. He unclipped the canteen from his belt and held it where she could see. Water, small sips. She hesitated, then reached with a trembling hand. She tried to drink too fast, choked, shoved it away, ashamed. Arthur steadied her, tilted it carefully until she swallowed in proper rhythm. Her voice was a whisper when it came. Lara, Arthur repeated it softly. Names matter. They anchor you. She blinked, uncertain if she believed him. He could have walked away then. One more orphan in the ruins meant nothing against the collapse of worlds. But his rules had been carved in him deeper than the scars across his knuckles. Protect when it is within reach. Don't waste on the hopeless. This child was not hopeless. She was right here, coin tapping against stone, waiting for someone who still lived by rules. Arthur pulled off his jacket, wrapped it around her thin frame, and felt the weight of bones pressing into his forearm as he lifted her. Light as starvation, yet heavy with responsibility. He carried her into the storm with deliberate steps, scanning rooftops for shadows, eyes narrowing against the hiss of rain. He had gone out for a valve, for rations. Instead, fate had placed a child in his arms, and with her, a choice. He did not falter. He walked toward his station, toward the one door he trusted, and told himself what he always had. Order is survival. And survival means protecting what you can. That night, the storm swallowed the city, but inside Arthur's arms, a new weight steadied him. He didn't yet call it family, but the choice was made. The storm had eased into a steady hiss by the time Arthur keyed the reinforced door to his station. The hinges groaned, protesting the damp that always worked its way into the metal. He pushed through anyway, shifting the small weight of the girl in his arms. Inside, the air was dry, tinged with the smell of cedar oil he used to keep insects at bay, and the faint metallic undertone of the sump pump. The station was not much, just a skeleton of surveyor's order carved out of ruin, but compared to the broken streets outside, it was shelter. He set the girl Lair in the cot he kept against the wall, its frame reinforced with scavenged steel brackets. She clung to his jacket, eyes wary, the coin and a strip of cloth clasped in her other hand. Arthur noticed the detail immediately. The cloth was stitched neatly, almost surgically straight, with faint chalk lines running across it like a code. Not the mark of a child, not the mark of accident. Someone had left her with intention. He crouched to meet her gaze. Who gave you that? Her lips trembled, but the answer came soft, certain. Mother. Arthur nodded once, absorbing the weight of the word. It confirmed what his gut had told him. She hadn't been abandoned, not carelessly. Somewhere in the ruin, a mother had prepared this child to survive. He didn't let the thought show on his face, but it settled his decision. Rescue wasn't just compassion, it was connection. He moved into rhythm, because rhythm was what kept a man alive in a place like this. He filled the kettle with water, set it on the stove, struck the spark. Flame caught, warming the room in degrees. He pulled a container from his shelf, broth, concentrate salvage from an old shipment, and began to mix it down. He explained each step aloud in short, even words, so she would know what he was doing, so her eyes wouldn't have to track him with the sharpness of prey. When he returned to her side, he offered a damp cloth. Hands first. She hesitated, then extended them. He wiped away grit, rain, the black film that clung to her nails. She flinched once, but he slowed, showing his palms when he finished. He gave her one of his spare shirts, far too large, but clean and dry. He turned his back while she pulled it on, his voice steady. No rush. Take your time. When he set the bowl of broth before her, she stared at it like it might vanish. She lifted the spoon awkwardly, sipped too fast, coughed, then glanced at him with shame flickering across her face. Arthur said nothing, only nudged the bowl back. Toward her, slow, stop when you need. She obeyed, sip by sip, until the bowl was half empty. Then she pressed it back and curled into his jacket again, the cloth with its chalk marks tucked to her chest. Arthur spread a blanket over her, adjusted the stove, then took his place by the door. He always slept there, boots on, pry bar within. Reach. Tonight was no different, but his eyes lingered on the cot longer than they usually did. The girl's breathing evened into the shallow rhythm of exhausted sleep. She did not let go of the cloth. Arthur rested against the steel frame of the door, hand on the iron bar. His mind traced possibilities. A child trained with codes meant there were others' family. Maybe a mother, maybe more. The marks on her cloth matched the habits of field. Crews who left messages for those who knew how to read them. It meant someone out there might still be searching. He closed his eyes, not in full sleep, but in the half-rest of a man who listened for footsteps through storm. The sump pump hummed, the stove ticked low, and the weight of the child's presence settled into the room like a new rule in his order. He had not planned for her, but now she was part of the house, and that meant his rules had shifted. Protect what is within reach. Keep the door shut unless you choose. Measure everything twice before you let it go. When the wind shifted outside and rattled the roof seam, Arthur lifted his head and listened. No steps, no shadows, only rain. He let the sound fold around him, his hand still resting on the bar. The district outside was ruin, but here, for one night, there was structure. For one night, he had chosen, and that choice would shape everything that came after. The rain hammered harder on the third night. It slid down the broken edges of the towers outside, cascaded through rusted seams in old transport lines, pooled in the cracked pavement until the streets were more water than stone. Inside Arthur's station, the stove ticked low, the pump hummed its steady rhythm, and the girl slept curled under the blanket, the stitched sash clutched tight to her chest. Arthur had folded her into his routine without breaking stride. Every morning he boiled water twice, once for tea and once to rinse the cloth he used to keep her clean. He inventoried rations with neat notes, adjusted the stove draft, checked the sump. And he added one task he hadn't done in months. He watched the street. He listened for steps between gusts of rain. He scraped steam from the window and marked the door frame with a small signal 3 short, one long, the kind of code only careful eyes would recognize. She was not abandoned. He knew it. Someone had prepared her. The chalk lines stitched into the sash told him so, which meant someone might come. If they did, he had to choose whether to open or not. He told himself he leaned toward open, but choices in ruin were never clean. When the knock came, it froze him where he sat, not frantic. Not the pounding of scavengers who wanted easy loot. It was measured. 3 short raps, 1 long. His mark echoed back at him from the other side of the steel. Every muscle in his back tightened. Intent. Intent meant minds like his at work out there. Arthur rose. His hand brushed Lara's shoulder. She woke instantly, silver-flecked eyes wide, clutching the sash without a sound. She had been taught well. He kept his voice low, steady. Stay behind me. If I say hold, you hold. She nodded, small and solemn. He lifted the bar, set the pry bar low at his thigh, and slid the chain into place. The hinges groaned as he cracked the door just wide enough to let the storm air cut in. Rain blew cold across his face. 2 figures stood in the narrow spill of light. The first was tall, skin the same violet tone as Lara's, but pale at the edges from exhaustion. Long black hair plastered to her neck, her tunic torn and knotted where a strap had broken. Her jaw was rigid, eyes silver bright, steady and sharp as they studied him. The door, the chain, the angles of his frame. The second stood half a step behind. She was lighter in hue, with long silver hair slicked dark against her shoulders. Her wraps had once been silken, but were now frayed, soaked through, clinging. Her posture was softer, but her hands were open and visible, careful not to threaten. The woman in front spoke, her voice low but controlled. "We are looking for a child. Small, violet skin, short black hair. Her name is Lyra." Arthur felt the tremor run through the girl at his side. He kept his tone steady. "Your names?" The taller one lifted her chin, eyes never leaving his. "Serena." She angled her head toward the second. "Nares." Arthur's assessment was quick, the old surveyor's habit running like current beneath his comb. Eyes clear, pupils equal, breath steady. No visible weapons. Clothes torn, but tied for movement. No packs. No backup shadows in the stairwell behind. No signs of a trap, at least. Not an obvious one. Behind him, Lara pressed against his leg, her small voice trembling. "Mother." The taller woman's expression cracked, relief and warning colliding in the same heartbeat. Arthur closed the door, slid the chain free, and opened wide enough for them to enter. He didn't step aside completely, not yet. The two hesitated a fraction, the hesitation of people who had been trapped at doors before. Then Serena moved first, her posture hard but deliberate, drawing Nares with her. They crossed the threshold. Without crowding him, their eyes flicking to the bar and bolt the way his had flicked to the stairwell. Arthur dropped the bar back into place. The heavy thunk filled the room with a weight of safety. Lyra stepped from behind him. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply held up the sash, the stitches and chalk lines shining faint in the lamplight. Serena's face cracked open then, exhaustion breaking to reveal something raw, human. She pulled her daughter in with both arms, hands shaking as she clutched her close. Nares laid her palms over both of them, bowing her head as if bracing against a wind only she could feel. Arthur stood back, jaw set, feeling the ache that always came when relief arrived too late for full joy. But he didn't move, not yet. He waited until Serena lifted her head and met his gaze across the cot where her daughter clung. "Thank you," she said, the words stiff at first, then stronger. "You left the mark. I saw it." "I did," Arthur answered simply. "You left the first." Serena nodded once, then swayed. Nares caught her elbow. Arthur pointed to the stove. "Sit, warm yourselves." They crossed the room, dripping water onto the boards, taking the two chairs by the flame. Arthur swung the kettle into place, set a pot for broth, reached for clean towels. He moved with the same calm rhythm he always had. Order, structure, rules. It was what he offered them now. The rain pounded outside, the world still ruin. But inside, for the first time in years, Arthur's station held more than one heartbeat that wasn't his own. And he knew the choice he had made would change everything that came next. The stove breathed a low, steady heat, pushing back the damp that clung to the women's skin and clothes. The steam from the kettle fogged the small room, softening its sharp edges of iron and stone. Arthur moved around the stove with the precision of a man who had learned long ago that every action had weight. He poured boiling water into 2 cups, added a pinch of dried leaves, and set the pot of broth where it would catch the warmth, but not boil over. He didn't rush. He didn't explain himself in speeches. His rhythm was explanation enough. Serena sat nearest the flame, posture rigid despite her exhaustion. The light caught the bruising along her collarbone, the cut on her arm that had been stitched with threads stripped from clothing. Her silver eyes stayed sharp, following Arthur's movements like she was cataloging him piece by piece. The chain, the bar, the way he checked the stove twice before stepping back. Even when her daughter nestled in her lap, Serena's gaze never fully softened. Pride and vigilance had been hammered into her. Both were armor she refused to shed. Nares sat beside her, shoulders hunched beneath the towel Arthur had handed her. She murmured a soft thank you when he gave it, her voice carrying more courtesy than strength. Her eyes were different from Serena's, softer, curious. She watched Arthur not as a threat to be measured, but as a puzzle she was trying to solve. The scars on his knuckles, the steady set of his jaw, the way he spoke sparingly, only when necessary, and always in plain words. Arthur placed the cups on the table. Tea is strong. Sip slow. Nerys cupped hers in both hands, the heat soaking into her fingers. Serena hesitated, then lifted the cup, her gaze never leaving him as she sipped. She set it down deliberately, as if to show she wasn't in his debt. Arthur leaned against the stove, arms crossed. He let the silence stretch. The house didn't need filling with words. What mattered was steadiness, and steadiness spoke for itself. Lyra shifted from her mother's lap, her small hands still clutching the sash. She edged closer to Arthur, silver-flecked eyes searching. He crouched low, voice calm. Roth is ready. He poured 3 bowls, set them on the table in order. First for Lara, then for Serena, then for Nerys. He served himself last, standing by the stove as he ate. Order mattered, child first, guest next, host last. It was a rule he didn't need to announce, but the women noticed. Serena's gaze lingered longer this time. She had seen men pretend generosity before, but Arthur's actions carried no performance. He did not hover for praise, nor watch to see if she would falter. He simply gave, then stepped back into his rhythm. Her jaw tightened. Pride warred with suspicion. Suspicion warred with hunger. She lowered her eyes and ate. Nerys glanced between them, lips parting as if to speak, but she said nothing. Instead, she sipped broth in slow, careful pulls, her shoulders easing little by little. When the bowls were empty, Arthur cleared them without comment, set them in a neat stack, and wiped the table with a rag. His discipline extended to every motion, each one clean, deliberate, the same as he had done when the Federation still demanded daily reports. Serena broke the silence at last, her voice low and edged. You were survey course, not a question. Arthur gave a short nod. Once, her mouth twitched as if she'd expected him to lie, to deny it. Relief flickered for the smallest fraction of a second, before pride buried it again. We followed your marks. They were clean. Nerys drew the towel closer around her shoulders. And your door shuts like a man who plans to wake up. Arthur said nothing. He checked the bolt on the door, the chain, the sump pump, and the stove draft, his routine unbroken. But Serena was not finished. Her silver eyes narrowed, her words harder now. We have been told before that we were safe. Every man wanted payment later. She leaned forward, voice a blade wrapped in exhaustion. What do you want? Arthur met her stare without flinching. Respect my rules. Don't endanger the house. Care for the child first. That's all. The bluntness struck harder than kindness ever could. Serena sat back slowly, her shoulders still taut, but her suspicion cracked. She had braced for bargaining, for hunger in his eyes. Instead, she found iron discipline. Nerys lowered her gaze into her lap, her lips pressing into something close to relief. Lyra curled against her mother, small and still, but her eyes flicked to Arthur with the fragile trust of a child who had already decided. The rain outside hissed down the broken streets, drowning the ruins in its constant rhythm. But inside the station, a different rhythm had taken hold, measured movements, clear rules. The first fragile threads of trust stretched across the table. Arthur sat near the door, pry bar within reach, boots still on. His voice was quiet when he spoke, carrying more weight than volume. Tomorrow, we decide the work that makes sense. There's always work to keep a house standing. He didn't look at them as he said it, but the air shifted. Serena's suspicion dulled a fraction. Nerys' posture eased. Lyra's shoulders loosened. For the first time in years, Arthur's station held more than survival. It held the first flickers of belonging. The days that followed settled into a rhythm, though the rhythm carried tension beneath it like dust that refused to be swept away. The stove breathed heat, the pump hummed, and the rain beat it steady. Pattern against the roof, but inside the station, new sounds filled the spacecloth, wrung out and hung by the eaves. The scrape of rations divided into smaller portions, the faint voice of a child asking simple questions. Lyra adapted quickly, as Arthur had expected she would. She ate without complaint, watched the bolt on the door with sharp eyes, and repeated his hand signals with precision. She was a child, yes, but she was also a student of survival. The women moved differently. Serena carried herself as though every moment might still turn to betrayal. Her silver gaze tracked Arthur constantly, measuring the tilt of his head when he portioned food, the set of his shoulders as he secured the roof seam, the precise way he folded cloth. Pride radiated from her even in exhaustion. She was grateful, perhaps, but she would not show it. Gratitude, Arthur knew, was something she equated with weakness. Nerys was different. Quieter, softer, with eyes that lingered too long. She helped with small tasks, sorting bolts, drying rations, brushing dust from stove vents. She performed them carefully, as though proving her worth with every movement. But more than once, Arthur caught her studying his hands, not just what they did, but how they did it. The way he tied knots, sharpened a blade with even strokes, moved without waste. Hers was not suspicion. It was fascination. Arthur adjusted his routine without announcing it. He cooked in larger portions, cleared space by the stove so the women could sit closer to the heat, showed Lyra how to fill the water canister without spilling. He explained little, spoke even less, but the quiet itself was a lesson. Order did not need words to be known. Still, tension pushed through in small, sharp moments. One evening, as the storm rattled against the windows, Arthur sat by the stove, mending the cracked handle of a cooking pot. Nerys crouched near him, silver hair spilling over her shoulder, her lilac skin faintly glowing in the firelight. She watched his hands work, each stitch precise, each knot pulled tight. "You do everything with such care," she whispered, as if afraid to break the stillness, even with broken things. Arthur didn't look up. Broken things still work if you treat them right. Her breath caught. And what about broken people? This time he met her eyes, steady, unflinching. Same rule. Nerys' lips parted, words trembling at the edge, but footsteps cut through the moment. Serena rose from her place by the cot, her daughter in her arms, her stare sharp and burning as it locked on them both. "Don't mistake calm words for safety, sister," she said, voice low but cold. Nerys' cheeks flushed, torn between shame and defiance. Arthur's jaw tightened, but he didn't intervene. He had learned that between siblings, force carried farther than reason. He let the silence stand. Later that night, when Lyra was asleep and Serena lay rigid on the cot beside her, Nerys returned to Arthur. He sat near the door, checking the bolt, his pry bar resting across his lap. She hesitated, then whispered, "I believe you. You're not pretending." Arthur's gaze stayed on the door. "Belief is your choice, not mine to force." Nerys' hand lifted, brushed against his, hesitant, testing whether he would pull away. He didn't. Her touch lingered, fragile but real. For a moment, the room was still, a fragile balance hanging in the air dot. It broke when Serena stirred, her eyes opening just enough to see what passed between them. Her voice cut through the quiet, sharp, but restrained so as not to wake her daughter. "Nerys, back to your bed." Nerys froze, then withdrew slowly, torn between shame and something else she didn't yet have words for. Arthur's voice cut through before the tension could crack further. "Tomorrow we work outside. Roof needs patching. Water traps need clearing. There's a place for each of you in it. Save arguments for daylight." His tone carried command without volume, the kind of authority that had once settled disputes in field crews. The women fell silent. Neres retreated, though her eyes lingered on him for a heartbeat longer. Serena's gaze burned from across the room, pride and suspicion battling within her. Arthur leaned back against the steel door, the pry bar cool across his knees. The warmth of Neres's touch lingered in his hand, but so did Serena's sharp warning. He understood what was happening. This was no longer about survival alone. The sisters were testing him, not just with questions of food or shelter, but with something deeper. Could he be trusted not only with their lives, but with their vulnerability? The storm battered the roof, but inside the station, another storm gathered, silent and heavier. Arthur kept his vigil, eyes open in the dark, waiting for daylight to demand the answers. None of them yet had the courage to speak aloud. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of damp light that made every broken slab of Dravara look the same shade of ash. Inside the station, Arthur rose first as always. He stoked the stove until the flame licked steady, boiled water, rinsed the cloth he used to wipe Laura's hands. Routine was a language he didn't need to speak aloud. The room felt it, the rhythm of survival, turned into order. Serena stirred. Soon after, sitting upright on the cot with Lara's head resting against her lap. Her posture was as rigid as ever, silver eyes sharp even before she spoke a word. She watched Arthur move with the same intensity she had the night before, as if the tilt of his wrist or the pace of his steps might reveal something he hadn't said. Pride held her spine straight, but there was fatigue under it, a weariness she couldn't mask. Nerys woke slower, stretching under the oversized shirt Arthur had given her, silver hair falling loose around her face. She murmured a quiet greeting, softer than Serena's silence, her eyes searching Arthur's movements, not for weakness, but for steadiness, for proof that yesterday's calm hadn't been an act. Breakfast with simple broth, divided in order. Laria first, then the women, Arthur last. The child sat up drowsy, still clutching her sash, but when Arthur guided the spoon to her lips, she obeyed with sleepy trust. Serena accepted her bowl without a word, but she did not look away from him. Neres whispered thanks and sipped in careful silence. It was Alea who shattered the quiet. She set down her spoon halfway through and looked at the three adults in turn. Her small voice was hesitant, but it carried a weight far heavier than her. Years. Are we a family now? The room froze. Serena's hands stiffened around the bowl. Neres's breath caught, her eyes widening. Arthur lowered his own bowl slowly, meeting the girl's gaze. Her silver-flecked eyes were too serious for a child, but they demanded an answer all the same. Yes, Arthur said, his voice steady. Certain. We are. The words fell into the room like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples through each of them. Lara's expression soft, the tightness in her small shoulders easing for the first time since he had found her. She whispered, almost to herself, I wanted to hear that. Then she bent back over her broth, calmer, anchored. Serena blinked hard, as if fighting something that threatened to show. Her pride was armor, but the cracks in it had widened. Neres lowered her head, lips trembling faintly before she swallowed. Her relief in silence. Arthur returned to his rhythm without commentary. He stacked bowls when they were finished, wiped the table, checked the pump. But the air in the station had shifted. Not survival, not suspicion, something heavier. Belonging. Later, when Lara napped wrapped in her mother's jacket, Arthur moved to check the roof seam. Serena followed him outside, standing beneath the dripping eaves while he tested the ladders. Footing. He glanced back at her, voice level. How far have you traveled? 2 districts, she answered flatly. 10 doors turned us away. One tried to trade food for flesh. Another threatened to sell Era for medicine. Every time we knocked, we braced for rejection. Her hand tightened on the sash her daughter had left behind. When I marked it, I prayed someone would understand. Arthur nodded once, steady. You found the right door. Serena searched his face, testing whether his certainty was arrogance or conviction. After a long second, she found conviction. Something in her shoulders eased, almost imperceptible. Inside, Nerys folded dried cloths and hummed faintly as she worked. She glanced at Arthur when he returned, eyes lingering on his hands as he hung his wet jacket by the stove. Later that evening, she whispered to her sister when she thought he slept, "Maybe he is different." Serena's reply was low, guarded. "Or maybe he hides it well. Time will tell." Arthur didn't move, but he heard every word. He lay against the steel door, eyes open to the shadows of the station, aware that what had begun as shelter was already shifting. The walls of mistrust were cracking. The child had named them a family, and none of them had denied it. For the first time in years, Arthur felt the weight of responsibility settle in his chest, not as burden, but as choice. And though he would never say it aloud, part of him welcomed it. Outside, the rain eased into drizzle. Inside, the station no longer echoed with emptiness. It pulsed with the quiet rhythm of breaths that belonged together. The rain had finally broken, leaving Travara wrapped in a strange hush. Water clung to every jagged edge of the ruins, dripping steadily into the gutters and cracks, but for once no storm battered the roof. Inside Arthur's station, the quiet was heavier, as if the whole building held its breath. The stove glowed steady, casting a warm orange into corners that had once known only shadow. Leia was gone for the afternoon, taken by an older neighbor, woman whom Arthur trusted enough to teach the child how to sort trinkets for barter. It was the first time since that night at the door that the station held only 3 voices instead of 4. The absence of small footsteps and soft questions left the air charged, restless. Arthur sat at the table, his broad hands folded, listening to the pump's hum. Serena and Nerys moved around the room with deliberate slowness. Serena's steps were measured, her tunic hanging loose from days of wear, her pride carrying her spine straight even when exhaustion weighed her down. Nerys drifted softer, silver, hair slipping forward as she tilted her head toward Arthur. Her movements fluid where Serena's were sharp dot. It was Nerys who broke the silence first. Her voice was low, almost hesitant, but steady enough to cut through the stillness. "She's safe for a few hours." Her eyes lifted, finding Arthur's. "That leaves us here with you." Serena stood behind her sister, arms folded, gaze sharp but no longer hostile. Pride made her stiff, but her words trembled at the edges. "You've given us more than survival, and we've been holding back." Arthur rose slowly, his boots heavy on the floorboards. His frame cast a shadow across the table, the weight of him filling the space without threat. He looked at each woman in turn, his voice low, even. "Are you certain? This isn't payment. This isn't debt." Nerys stepped closer, her fingers brushing lightly against his wrist. Her touch was soft, deliberate. "We know. It's what we choose." Serena followed, her hand pressing firm against his chest, the strength of her touch fiercer, more defiant, but no less certain. "No more walls," she said. "Not tonight." Arthur's breath came slow, steady, his gaze shifting between them. For weeks he had rationed not just food, but himself discipline in every word, every gesture, every choice. Now, with both women standing before him, he felt the discipline bend, not into weakness, but into acceptance. The stove cast the room in a warm glow, shadows stretching long across the walls, as the 3 of them moved together, not with desperation, but with release. Serena carried fire, her pride burning into raw need, fierce and unyielding, until Arthur met it with his unshakable steadiness. Nerys carried softness, her touch hesitant at first, and sure, a gentleness that balanced her sister's flame. Arthur became their anchor, their center, guiding with patience and certainty, never taking, only holding, steadying, grounding. Time slipped. The station that had once known only silence and routine pulsed with warmth, with closeness, with the sound of breathing freed from fear. The three of them moved not as strangers bound by rain and ruin, but as something chosen, fragile and strong, all at once. When it ended, they lay near the stove, the fire casting low light over damp skin and tired eyes. Nerys rested against his shoulder, eyes closed, her breath soft. Serena lay on his other side, her head on his chest, her pride softened into quiet calm, her hand resting firm over his heart, as though testing its steadiness. Arthur held them both, his breathing even, his expression unreadable but certain. The first time since the Federation's collapse, he did not feel like a man merely surviving a broken world. He felt like a man who had built a home. When Alla returned later, small hands clutching her sash, she found them around the stove, cooking together, laughter soft in their voices. She smiled, fragile but real, and whispered to herself, "Family." And this time, the word carried no fear, no doubt, only truth. That night, after Lara was asleep and the sisters sat beside him in the quiet, Arthur traced the sash with his fingers. The chalk marks were no longer just directions. They formed a message he hadn't fully read until now. His surveyor's mind pieced it together with calm precision, and the meaning struck deeper than he had expected. Serena and Nerys were not merely survivors. They were fugitives, exiles from a ruling line among their people. Lara was not only a daughter. She was blood of a lineage hunted for its claim. Arthur set the cloth down, his hand resting heavy over the bar at the door. His voice was low, certain, and final. "The door stays shut. Whoever comes, they face me first." Outside, the district lay quiet in its ruin. Inside, a family had been born, not by accident, not by chance, but by choice. And with that choice came a new kind of strength, one even the endless rain of Dravara could not wash away.